Mali's military government, who has seized approximately 3 tons of gold, valued at around $245 million from a certain Canadian mining company called Barrick Gold. And with me to do that is Lerato and Mustafa. You guys are welcome to the show.
Welcome, guys. Yeah, so the first angle I'm going to look at is that so you see the difference between African nations and Western nations, or even if this had been a revolution in China or this had been a revolution in Russia with the Bolsheviks, they would have seized everything and say it's state owned and there's nothing you can do. Mali's not doing that. They've given these guys chances. They're saying that, okay, you guys, first of all, you start off with you guys are getting 90% of the revenue from this, and Mali only gets 10. Then they shifted to like 60% and say you guys get 40, anywhere between 40 and 20%. Whereas in other countries like China, they'll be like, you guys go, the state takes over. I think two things are affecting this. I think Mali will eventually do that. The writing's on the wall, but they're doing a transition because they don't have the infrastructure and the manpower right now to mine it themselves and get 100% of the revenue so that foreign companies, and also it'll be a provocative move to just seize all these companies. They say, "Oh, look at these guys. They're tyrant. Tyrant isn't the word, but they'll say they're anti-democratic. They're anti-global market." So I think Mali doesn't want to build bad. They don't want to build a bad reputation or build bad trust within the global market because they're going to have to be a global. They're going to be part of globalism, which means they should respect some of the rights of corporations, even though, to be honest with you, from a point of view of social justice, these companies need to be totally booted out. But we're living in a world, I think China and Russia are probably moderating them. But what you will see is this Canadian company, the signs are already on the wall. They put a warrant out for the CEO's arrest. They arrested some of their people just for a day or two. I call that intimidation. And now they've seized about 180 million or to 200 million dollars worth of gold, which they say, and I believe them when they say this, that's what that company owes them. That company was laundering money and wasn't paying taxes. So this company will be lucky if they even get the right to do business in Mali anymore. My prediction is the writing is on the wall, and what Mali is doing is a less provocative way of kicking the West out. They're not totally kicking them out; they're phasing them out. What do you think, Larato? Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a phase out approach. Um, but I think also what Goita and the the Malian junta are trying to do um, is sort of start negotiations, because I think they started negotiations sometimes in 2023 in August, when they put
Mhm.
out new negotiations on how they need to uh, progress in terms of mining agreements with
Yeah.
foreign companies. And I think they're trying to negotiate for fair value on what um, these resources are actually worth, because you are having instances where the governments are struggling in terms of with their GDP, but they are producing all these raw
Yeah.
materials.
And then you're getting
And
only 10% of your gold. That's theft right there, man.
yes,
Yeah.
for sure, and of course the design that we've seen often with these Western companies and their supporting government is that they would install puppets into leadership positions
Yeah.
that would then take a cut of some of these profits, but those would be crumbs in comparison to the amounts that are being taken out. So I
That
think
gold.
this is
Go ahead,
yeah,
go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah.
Sorry.
I think that the idea that we have a certain amount of gold that is sitting and that has been seized. I think $180 million worth,
Yep.
uh, according to figures that we see being reported, um, gives us something that is there, that is worth disputing, that is of particular value.
Oh yeah.
And of
That's
course,
money. That's real money. It's
yeah,
not
yeah, yeah,
finance-based money. That's real money there.
for sure.
And BRICS
And
is
of
going to need
course,
that. BRICS is going to need gold reserves. Yeah.
yeah, and of course, there has been a lot of a lot of investigations that have come out and reports that have come out that show evidently how some of these companies have been evading taxes and things like
Oh yeah.
that. In as much as you mentioned this as being sort of like intimidative in the same way that they did with the Australian company that had to pay, I think,
Yeah. The reason I
120
say it's
million.
intimidation is that because they at least they let them out of jail. In
Sure,
a
sure.
hardcore revolution, those guys will stay in jail. Go ahead.
We'll stay in jail.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I think they're setting an example, and I do think that they should actually set hardcore sentences to say this is,
Oh yeah.
you'll be in jail for 3
Because
months.
it's more of a danger. For example, stealing their gold is more dangerous than shooting some missiles into their territory. Because you're stealing their gold, that's going to lead to low infant mortality, crime, disease. The amount of deaths that will come from looting that country are far more than a military attack. So it needs to be treated as a military attack. That's why we always say things like sanctions and looting countries. That's an act of war. Sorry, continue.
They are actually acts of aggression.
Mhm.
They are acts of economic aggression.
Mhm.
And I think capitalism has sort of put a veil over
Over the
all these
violence.
these economic crimes to just say this is
Mhm.
capitalism, this is how business works. But I
Mhm.
think we are seeing a change in the world in terms of how we view this kind of violence as
Yeah.
violence, and I'm happy that Mali has sort of set
Yeah.
a precedent to say if these laws are broken, then CEOs must be arrested, because a lot of companies have been hiding under corporate sort of law immunity kind of a thing, in terms of not being accountable,
Yeah.
not being
Now,
held accountable for the
now
decisions that companies make.
for Nigeria,
Yeah.
and I don't know about Burkina Faso. Now, Nigeria, they've actually said they're going to actually nationalize their uranium, aren't they? Or are they going to give contracts to other companies? But I know they've seized it from France. France has no hold on it anymore. How's that working out? I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the key, I think
Oh
even
no, they said they have
with
to renegotiate. Renegotiate, I think.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But I think with Mali, like you rightly said, that the idea is to nationalize,
Yeah.
and where collaboration is possible,
We
and they can
we know we
some
all know that eventually China and no, well not Russia, but China definitely will have some
for
shares
sure will
within. Yeah. Yeah.
will be ready to industrialize and
Yeah.
move the
Yeah.
countries towards a little bit more
And
independent.
what China wants to do is they're saying that once BRICS comes, there'll be not any one currency for BRICS. It'll be a mixed basket, but it'll be a function of all the commodities and the value of each country's own currency. But there'll be so now that they can trade inter. You can trade. Oh, you want gold? Okay, we can do gold. Or do you want not Nigeria's currency, whatever the agreement is. But once you have that basket and the guys are working together, it's going to create a new currency itself, but that currency is going to be very complex. I don't know money theory, but for them to figure out a neutral currency like the euro is going to be very complex. That's why the transition is going to take time. But for now, gold will do. Gold will, because China has said that with these countries, China has enough gold reserves so that they can back countries that trade with them. They say, okay, well, we're not going to give you yen, but we'll give you gold, and you can use gold anywhere in the world, unless the West decides to become totally crazy and wants to cut off trade with these countries totally. What do you think, Lorato? Then we'll go to Afalabi. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I think the gold standard
yeah,
is coming across as the most stable,
yeah.
um, and we also see this kind of like seizure of.
Gaddafi is smiling in his grave. Let me stop.
Yeah. Even the siege of resources in Mali
Yep.
is coming after we've seen sort of like an increase in the value of the resource of gold.
Yeah.
Um,
No, the
so
prices are
so
shooting up. This is also a sign that BRICS is getting stronger because now the market value of gold is going up and it's being controlled by countries which are not Western. So that's where the scarcity is coming in now. They can control the supply now. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
no, for sure,
Yeah.
and I think it goes back to one of the first points that I said in terms of economic and social justice that is required in order to equalize, um, sort of like dealings between Africa and the rest of the
Yeah.
globe
Because
is
we've got gold, uranium, everything. Yeah.
yeah, is the idea of fair value, and
Yeah.
I think China and Russia have approached, um, the the BRICS sort of
They're
conglomerate.
businessmen. They're businessmen. Yeah.
And yeah. But in as much as they're thinking about business, because they are coming from socialist backgrounds,
Yes,
they
you
are
beat me to
thinking
it again.
about
What I was going to say was that communism couldn't work because it was anti-business. They're working because they have
sure.
hybrids of socialism and capitalism together.
And
Yeah, continue. Sorry. Yeah.
yeah, like
That's
social
the synthesis.
capitalism.
Marx didn't see that the synthesis would go that way. Go ahead. Synthesis, antithesis, and
No,
thesis.
for sure. And
Yeah.
yeah. And I think that the synthesis is a very important point in history, that the BRICS sort of conglomerate, because South Africa and Brazil are and India, I think, are capitalist countries.
Yeah.
And then in the meantime, you have China and Russia, which are
Yeah.
more,
South Africa,
So
with its
it's a very
constitution, South Africa is almost an anarchy. I'm not saying that in a bad way. By the true definition of anarchy, almost like libertarian, like, oh, property, everybody has property, and it's not the state's right to jump in, but which leads to inequality, though. Go ahead. Yeah.
It is a very dangerous, but we have been trying to push in more socialist
Yeah.
kind of
And I
like
think this is where
ideals.
EFF comes in, and PAC and all those guys. These young people. South Africa is
Sure.
actually one of the only countries in the world, other than France, which I think has a very revolutionary youth. I think France has it too.
Yeah.
I just think that the French kids don't have the socialist theory, but they have the theory of justice and equality. They just don't know what direction to go because they're not reading Marx, and they're reading Camus. Go ahead.
Sure. So I think the battle between the West and Africa has been like this push and pull, or this tug of
Yeah.
war between capitalism and socialism, in terms of which direction the post-colonial world goes.
Yeah.
And I think the Sahel Alliance is definitely charting a
Yeah.
path forward.
Yeah, we'll talk more about these things in a separate episode, because this is interesting when you look at Nigeria, South Africa. They're all different types of countries that have their positives. Like, I think Nigeria is kind of Pan-Africanist, but they have that colonial mindset. South Africa has a revolutionary spirit, but there's inequality. Nigeria and those places are purely military and haven't been brought into the democratic fold yet. So each one is different, but it's good to see the diversity in Africa. Very quickly, your thoughts on that, then we'll go to Afolabi. I know Afolabi is like, what am I here? I'm here to take notes or something. Go ahead, Larato. Last thoughts on what I just said, then we'll move on to Afolabi.
Yeah. So I like I say, I think it strikes a chord in terms of the entire African approach and dynamic towards what economic collaboration is going to look like.
Okay, yeah, and we have to be aware of that we're different, so we can't have a uniform ideology. We have to adapt and figure out how to make it work.
It can be, but I think the BRICS conglomerate sets that precedent to say that they're open to you coming as you come, as long as you bring fair value to the table and you negotiate for your country to benefit.
And you know what's funny? Xi has a background in engineering, I think, chemical engineering. And Putin, like I keep telling people, Putin's master's thesis was controlling Russian minerals and resources and mining. And it's now look at what's happening in Mali. So these are people that have been thinking. These countries are hiring leaders who have the mental structure to work within business and mining and the sciences and economics, whereas the U.S. just hires lawyers and actors. You get what I'm trying to say? Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. So what are your thoughts, Afolabi?
Yeah, I think it's been a long a strategy by the imperial powers in the name of foreign investment. They use multinational corporations, specifically in the resource extraction industries, to go into these African countries, and they actually exploit. But what they are doing is they disguise it to look as foreign investment. And what normally happens is that they negotiate on equal trade agreements, and then they now put a puppet president there who makes the regulatory frameworks very, very weak.
So they don't pay taxes.
Yes, this now affects the developing countries. They now maximize their profits at the expense of local development. And this is what is happening in this case of Barry Gold. I think a pre-agreed negotiation was deviated from, and that's what made them to seize the gold. I think they want to begin to renegotiate those contracts,
Yeah.
especially
Yeah.
now that you have a junta in place instead
Yeah.
of a
And I can
democratic.
assure you that that Canadian company, any banking system in Canada, now won't you put France there, and in Britain, is actually part of the American Central Bank, and they just distribute it out there
Sure,
to make
sure,
it look like.
absolutely,
So what I'm trying to
absolutely,
say, Canada's bank is not independent. It's driven by the Federal Reserve in America.
of
That's why.
course.
That's why Trump is now saying Canada is an American state. Same thing with Australia. Australia doesn't have whatever money it has is ultimately banked by America. So this is an act of aggression against America. But notice I didn't mention France because France tends to be a little bit more flexible when it comes to these things. Last thoughts of Falabi, then we'll move on to the Mozambique story because we have limited time here.
Yeah, so basically what I'm saying is that if you look at it now, the company owns about 80%. I don't think that revenue sharing formula goes
That's not
down
fair.
well.
It,
Yeah,
yeah.
I said I don't hope that I think that the revenue sharing formula doesn't go down well with the Malian government. So they want it renegotiated because they said
Yeah.
they deviated from it. And 3 tons of gold is estimated to be worth about $245 million.
Yeah.
But Mali needs to be careful because at the end of the day, you want to be able to sell your gold and make revenue for the economy. So there has to be a balance. You don't want to ostracize yourself from the global
Yeah,
community.
but I probably you know what's going to happen if the West refuses to pump infrastructure. Guess who's going to pump it for them? China. You see,
Russia
and
and
China.
China.
And I think so. In other words, if I were the Canadian company, I wouldn't tell them, "Oh, you need our investment," because we all know it's just quiet because they don't want to look like they don't want China and Russia don't want to look like. I'm not even going to put Russia. This is China. Doesn't want to look like it's exploiting these guys. So they're just keeping quiet. But we all know that in the background China is praying that the West takes its investments out because the Chinese investment bank and the BRICS bank will take care. Quickly on that, Lorato, then we'll go to Mozambique. What do you think? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, uh, I go back to my point of fair value,
Yeah.
because I think as the sellers of what resources that the West needs, Africa has a right to set a price and
Yeah.
to stick by it. And I think it's just even in free trade capitalism, that's the principle.
Yeah.
This idea that setting a price and setting a principle is going to drive investors away, I think is kind of like a scare tactic, because they need the resource to
Mm-hmm.
begin with, and they should be willing to pay for it at the price that it comes.
And if it,
Even in view and in lieu of developments that they may have brought infrastructurally and so on. I think when we actually count the cost, um, uh, the profits far outweigh the inputs,
yeah,
and there needs to be a fair distribution
yeah.
of that value.
Yeah, and we won't talk about
Because
it now, but it's funny how this whole issue in South Africa too is about gold, and then prices of gold are going up, and companies in South Africa they're not willing to put in the overhead to function properly as a gold mining company, so it becomes abandoned. So you see the same thing going on with this Canadian company. They're talking about,
sure,
oh, they're saying that we can't pay the taxes because cost of production has gone up and we can't function, so you guys have to lose. So you see how it has to go the other way. Now the state needs to be the 60% shareholder, and you as the foreign company are lucky to just have a contract to exploit our resources because we don't have the manpower yet. You see what I'm saying, Lorato? Yeah.
yeah, no, for
So,
sure, and I think the challenge becomes how states become proactive.
yeah.
I mean, in the case of South Africa, in terms of defending some of these mining sites that may have been abandoned but still have material in them,
Yeah.
then it needs to think about how it can create a state-run mining program that
Yeah.
can benefit young people around those spaces, and employ them so that they're not led to these to like points of desperation and things like that.
Yeah.
And even possibly look at this kind of like, how you formalize migrant, um, like employment,
Yeah.
uh,
They need to
when
start getting
when there are
local economic initiatives tied to the mining, even if it's something small like making restaurants and things for people to eat there. Find every
yeah,
way to build
yeah,
up
and
to build up
things like
local
that.
industry. Yeah. transportation
I
to the
think,
mines, things like that, housing for people.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I
All
think
right, so let's
maybe
go.
to connect us to the Mozambicans,